Welcome back. This is part two of a video tour of the reports that are available both to you as an instructor and to students inside Deepwater. So again, I've gone to I've logged on, gone to my home page as an instructor, clicked on the pencil icon to get into a specific game, and that puts me at the dashboard for this game. And so what I've done in the first video in part one was to give you a brief description of the game overview report, the student participation report, the current round results report, and the game results report, game results to date report. That was part one of this video tour. Part two, I want to look at the student reports. And first, let's look at the market report. Now, this market report, what you see here is exactly the same report that all the students get. So every student, every team member that's playing this game will get this report in each round. So there's some basic information about the round up here. And remember, we're looking at round one of a 12-round game. And there's an overview here just to tell you very quickly whether anybody has gone bankrupt. And remember, the only way that a company can go bankrupt in Deepwater is if it runs out of cash. And we're at the beginning of the game, so there's no worries here about anybody actually running out of cash. They start with over 400 million. Okay, so this market report is divided into three sections. Here's the financial section, and it gives you some high-level information about each student or each team. And I think of this as equivalent to the publicly available information that might be available in a publicly traded company's annual report or in their 10K. So revenue, net income, net cash flow, and ending cash, basic financial situation. Then there's the operations report. Notice that this market report does not report on any decisions per se that other students have made. So we show production, and this is a cumulative amount, crew count at the end of this round, average hours per worker, and the percent trained. So you can think of this as OSHA type information, which is publicly available on companies. And then there's the social impact section. How many workers have been killed, injured, safety violations, Clean Water Act violations, social costs, and then the carbon footprint, and whatever response to the ethical challenge, if there was one in that round. So that's the market report. Again, I think of it as the same type of publicly available information that anybody competing against a company that's publicly traded would have access to. Okay. Now, let's go to the operations report, the team operations report. Let me open that up right away. There's an important difference between the team operations report you see and the team operations report that the student sees. So the instructor's version of the team operations report includes a page for every single team in the game. So you as the instructor can see each individual team report. So you see here there are 41 pages because there were 41 students playing this particular game. However, the students only see the report page that's appropriate for them. So here on this first page, if Chad Adams opens up the operations report for round one, he will see this page only. He will not see the reports on any other team, on any of his competitors. So that's the big difference between the instructor's operations report, which is complete and includes information on every team, and the team's operations report, which they only see their own information. So I want to take a little bit of time to basically give you a tour of this operations report. This is the report that teams will primarily use in making decisions for the very next round. And also, this is a report that reveals or shows how the various decisions are connected to outcomes. So it's very important that students and instructors as well understand how this report is organized and how the different pieces of information are connected together. This will also help you as the instructor in briefing students, debriefing students on round results, and helping them figure out what's going on, and also to be able to elicit some of their rationale, some of their reasoning for whatever decisions they've made. So let's just start right here. I'm just going to take the first one. And this, remember, this is round one. This is the first regularly scheduled round. 2 practice rounds have already been completed. And so first we see up in the upper left-hand corner here, the report captures the decisions that the individual teams have entered into the system. So this team decided they were going to produce in this round. They were not going to shut in. They decided not to overhaul. They requested 1.6 million barrels in production. They decided to spend $6 on maintenance, and they decided to spend $750,000 on safety. They hired 10, they didn't fire anybody, and they sent 16 off for training. And down here is a brief description of the ethical challenge for the round. Now let's just look for a moment at these decisions. And these numbers are meaningful only in relation to some benchmark, what I call the baseline values. And these you will see in the quick guide. Production, maintenance, and safety all have baseline values, and you can think of those as the values that the manufacturer, quote unquote, of the operating of the Deepwater oil rig recommends. These are the values that if you enter these values over and over and over again, everything should go fine. That is, you should not have an accident or blowout. For production volume, the baseline is 1.1 million barrels. So that's not a minimum, it's not a maximum, it's not even in one sense a recommended value. That's why I call it a baseline value. So if a team produces 1.1 million barrels every round, and they adhere to the baseline maintenance expense and the baseline safety expense, then everything should go okay. Not necessarily in terms of the finances, but just in terms of operations and operating safely. Again, for production volume, the baseline is 1.1 million barrels. Maintenance, the baseline is $8 a barrel. The baseline for safety expense is $1.2 million per round. And it's important to keep the units straight, and for students to keep the units straight. 1.1 million barrels per round, baseline production, $8 per barrel, baseline for maintenance, and $1.2 million per round for safety. So we can see here this student has deviated a little bit from them. They've produced more than the baseline, which is fine. There's a physical maximum to how much the rig can produce each round, and that's actually 1.65 million barrels. So this team has decided to produce pretty close to the maximum. They've decided to spend less than the baseline on maintenance, about 25% less, and they've decided to spend a bit less than half of the baseline on safety. Now, what are the implications of making those decisions? Well, the implications are several. One important implication is they are working their equipment harder than they would otherwise. That is, when you produce more, that results in more wear and tear on your equipment. Just as if you drive your car more, it increases the wear and tear on the engine, the brakes, drivetrain, etc. So they've decided to produce more, which puts more pressure, more stress on all of their equipment. And the additional pressure and stress and wear and tear obviously is going to increase to some degree the chances of something bad happening, such as a blowout. So this team has, in a sense, decided to take a bit more risk of something bad going on by producing more. Now, one way of compensating for that additional risk through the higher production is to increase the level of maintenance. This team, however, has decided to do exactly the opposite. They've decided to reduce maintenance below the baseline. So they produce significantly more than the baseline in terms of production. They're spending significantly less than baseline in terms of maintenance. So you would expect that that would result in increased wear and tear and even more risk to the system. And that is indeed true. The best indicator of that increased risk and the wear and tear on the equipment is if we go down here to the Rig Equipment Condition Index, what I call the RECI. And you can see here it's 18. This starts at 100. 100 represents an index for the quality, the condition of the equipment when the team first gets it. So if you're driving a new car off the lot, opening up a computer for the first time, this is the condition that the rig is in, the equipment is in when the team gets it. Now, the lower the number, the worse the condition of the equipment. The higher the number, the better. And there's no upper bound or lower bound on this number. So this number is meaningful only in relation to the baseline amount of 100 as an index. Here, by producing more than the baseline and spending less on maintenance than the baseline, they have driven the RECI below 100. That is, they've really added additional wear and tear onto their equipment, and the resulting condition of their equipment is significantly less than it was before. They really degraded their equipment a fair amount, and that's increased to some degree the risk of a blowout. How much is that risk increased? Well, they don't know. They just know that the risk goes up. So there's a very direct connection between amount produced, amount spent on maintenance, and the RECI. Now, the RECI carries over into the next round, in that this round ended with an RECI, an index of 18. The next round begins at 18 and then adjusts, changes depending on the production and the maintenance in that next round. This number can become negative. It's quite possible for somebody to successfully produce oil with a low RECI. It's possible, but the lower the number, the greater the chance of something bad happening, and those chances actually go up exponentially. Okay, so that's on the production on the equipment side. Let's look at safety expense. Safety expense, the baseline for safety expense is $1.2 million around. And that safety spending is spent, that money is spent completely in the given round. It's not banked. And what happens is when you spend less on safety, less on your safety program, result is there's a greater chance of an accident that could result in an injury or a fatality. And if we go down to our social impact section, we see, just so happens that there was an injury. They spent way less than the baseline on safety, and the result was they have one injured crew and also got tagged with 3 safety violations. Now, is it possible for a team to operate below baseline on safety and not injure a worker and not get a safety violation? And the answer is yes, it's possible. The less you spend on safety, the greater the chances of something bad happening, but there's no guarantee that something bad will happen if you skimp on safety. And flip that around, there's no guarantee if you really spend a lot on safety, there's no guarantee that there will be no accidents and no safety violations. Spending more on safety simply reduces the chances of those things happening. So there's a tight connection between safety expense and the chances of personal injury, fatalities, and safety violations. Now let's also look at the crew complement. They've decided here to hire 10 and send 16 off for additional or advanced training. Now, every rig starts with 105 crew members. It costs money to hire crew, it costs money to fire crew, it costs money to train. What this team has decided to do is they're going to send some of their crew off rig for training, and when they're gone for training, they're gone for 2 rounds. So they've reduced the manpower available, and to compensate, they've decided to hire 10 additional workers. When those 16 workers who are off for training come back in round 3, then they will have on board the rig 131 workers. But right now, there's 115 on the there's 115 total, and 98 are on the rig. Okay. I got all that wrong, didn't I? So they've decided to hire 10 and send 16 for training. So they start with 105 crew. By hiring 10, they bring that complement up to 115. But there are only 98 on the rig. What happened to the other 17? Well, the story is right here. 16 were sent off the rig for training, so they're gone for 2 rounds. They'll be back in round 3. And 1 was injured, and that injured worker is going to be out for rounds 2 and 3 and back in round 4. Obviously, only the workers who are on rig are available to do work. Now notice the result of trying to produce so much, almost to the maximum, and having a lower complement of crew on the rig to actually do work. They normally would have 105. There are 7 here missing, and that's simply the net of hiring 10, sending 16 off for training, and a 17th injured. So the result is they're trying to produce a lot of oil with a short staff, and that drives up the number of hours per worker. The maximum hours that a crew member can work in any round is 100. Using baseline values, the average hours worked per worker per round is about 60, 62, 65. So that tells you, this 89.8 tells you they are really working these people a lot. And that probably also contributed to the accident. Right? Not only decreased safety spending, but they are really working their crew quite a bit to get that production to make up for the short staff. Both of those factors contributed to the injury and contributed to the safety violation. Okay, so that's a quick tour of the left-hand side. I actually also want to mention the BOP service life numbers. The Rig Equipment Condition Index gives you a measure of the condition of the rig's equipment that's above waterline, the part that you see floating on the surface. What that index doesn't measure is the condition of the blowout preventer, which is on the ocean floor and invisible. And there's only one indication of what kind of condition that blowout preventer is, and that's how long it's been used. The blowout preventer starts the simulation. In this case, you can change that when you configure a game, but in this case, it starts out with a service life of 6 rounds. Round 1 is completed. That means that the blowout preventer has been in service for 1 round, and that leaves 5 rounds of service left. As you get closer and closer to the end of the equipment service life, and as you go beyond the service life, the chances of the blowout preventer failing go up. Now, if somebody operates their blowout preventer for 7 rounds or 8 rounds when the service life is set at 6, will that necessarily cause a blowout? No. It just increases the chances of a blowout. So this is where students keep track of the condition of their blowout preventer and how it might contribute, how its condition might contribute to a blowout. All right, let's go on to the left side, which is the more financial side. And we see here at the top profitability. There's a very abbreviated income statement here, revenues and operating expenses. Revenues obviously driven by the amount of oil produced, and then the calculated operating margin. There's some interest expense, and here's the net income. Now that net income was generated from this production, 1.6 million barrels, and this crude oil price, 44.63. Now, as I'm making this video, the oil price is significantly lower. It's down below 30 barrels. Obviously, I don't know what it will be when you watch this video, but this $6.4 million in net income was driven by this level of production and this level in terms of the crude oil price. Here's the very abbreviated balance sheet, and really the only part here that students need to pay attention to is the cash. All other assets, the long-term debt, the other liabilities, all those remain fixed throughout the game. But students do need to keep an eagle eye on how much cash they have, because if they run out of cash, they go bankrupt and they are out of the game. It's the only thing that will throw a team out of the game, is if they run out of cash. And here's a very abbreviated cash flow statement, and this shows how much cash was provided by their operating activities. So you can see, particularly in this low oil price circumstance, that net income is significantly less than the cash flow coming out of the operations. That's one of the reasons that oil companies continue to operate even if they're unprofitable, because their operations still can still create a positive net cash flow. So here's a summary of the Gulf weather for the current round, the Beaufort 4 measure of wind strength. The next round forecast is a Beaufort 2, which is very quiet. Normally the Gulf is in a 3 to 4 situation. Strong storms can drive that up to 5, 6, or 7, or 8, or even higher. That will reduce production, but things look pretty quiet here. And down here we have a graph of the crude oil price as it's changed over the game. And so at least for this period, it's been relatively flat. Okay, so that's a brief tour of the operating report. A big lesson is the meaning of each of these numbers needs to be compared to baseline values, and students need to be able to understand the connection between their decisions up here and what happens down here, particularly in terms of the rig equipment condition, how hard they're working their crew, and the resulting fatalities and injuries, as well as some of the financials. Okay, that's a quick tour of the market report and the operating report, and that's the end of part 2 of this video tour of the reports in Deepwater. Thank you.